This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are building the future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and today I'm joined by Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown, author of Revolutionary Leadership, a Power Playbook for Black women. It's a powerful and deeply researched guide that challenges outdated ideas about who gets to lead, how leadership is recognized, and what true equity requires. In her book, Dr. Brown brings together academic research, historical insight, consulting experience, and personal narrative to honor the leadership Black women have practiced for generations. Leadership rooted in authenticity, community, care, and the courage to redesign systems that were never built with them in mind. Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited that you're here too, because I always love when books start with a banger of a stat, and yours
Ah,
does. The fact
yeah.
that, Black women make up nearly 8% of the US population, but hold over 1% of the top executive leadership jobs. And I think if you are in the business sphere, you kind of knew that number was low. But when you throw the number one, it really hits you hard in the face. So tell me about when you learned about that stat, and obviously that's sort of the starting point for your book, but tell me about that stat and why it's so eye-opening.
Well, I personally have known about that stat for a very long time, and it's better than what it was when I first learned about it. I had always had a desire to make it to the C-suite. Even in high school, my goal was to be C-suite in some multinational organization. We didn't call them multinational organizations then, but they were
Right.
corporations. But there was no one in those spots. And, fast forward 30 years later, there's still no one in those spots. And so that's where I wanted to start, for the book to just frame it as what the heck is going on here? And what does it say that we can and must do?
It's amazing that I'm a big believer. I'm not sure if you are of the C to B. Like you need to see something to become something.
Yes,
And obviously in African American history, like Jackie Robinson is like the pinnacle, right? But the young black
absolutely.
boys didn't think that playing baseball was possible until they saw Jackie Robinson play for the
Right,
Dodgers.
right.
And I think that's sort of like a chicken and the egg problem, right, Dr. Brown? The fact that you got to see to be, but if there's no one to see, how do you
How do
be?
you be? You can't even imagine that it is possible. So it is really, really important. You can see, but you see other people and you question, is that for me?
So what are we doing? What are we doing to remedy this problem? And I sometimes try to find something analogous to sports. So in the NFL, they famously came up with the Rooney Rule to help
Really rule.
get
Yeah.
more African American coaches. And I know that's a bit flawed, but the base of the issue is that most head coaches are hired because they were successful assistant coaches, and the
Right.
problem is there aren't that many
There wasn't a
African
pipeline for
American,
assistant
right?
coaches.
And that's going through
Yes.
that pipeline.
Yes.
So that's going on in the NFL, and obviously the Rooney Rule is flawed because you get into a lot of this performative stuff where they're going to interview a black candidate just because, but they know they're not going to hire the person, but they have to fill the requirements. So there is flaws in it, but it's the best they've come up with so far.
Right.
What are we doing in American corporate culture in similar fashion?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that it's American corporate culture, singularly. It's all institutions, right? It's a systems issue, just like in sports. If there's no pipeline, well, then you don't come CEO um, or leading, at the executive levels of any organization automatically. It takes years and years and years and years, sometimes 20 plus, in order for that to happen. Some 20 plus was very intentional investment, very intentional redesigning, of system, and that is what is required, right? Is redesigning these systems. This book really isn't about surviving broken systems. This book is about building better ones. And so for the reader, it's not just, for Black women, it is for Black women. True. From the standpoint, like, here's what the research says works. Here are the frameworks. But it's also true for organizations. It's like, here's what you're getting wrong, and here is why your advancement systems are failing, and here's what you need to do to redesign them, like the Rooney Rule. And if it's not, um, you know, a systemic or a system wide intervention, then you will continue to get the same things that you always got.
You define a revolutionary pathmaker as a Black woman who creates roots where none exist. When did you first
Yes.
realize you had become one yourself?
Mm. I realized that I had become one when I made the shift from moving from being acted upon by systems to designing them. I had some opportunities earlier in my career where there were a few people who listened, like, well, what do we need to improve and how does that change? And it it woke up something in me, right? And so, again, shifting to transforming, and not just leading. And there's something about, you know, exclusion, right, that requires you to be innovative and creative, which also opens up a whole, um, myriad of possibilities.
And tell me about the idea that, the book argues that systems need to be redesigned. When you throw around the word system, I feel like that sometimes feels very big for people. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, how do we rearrange the system that's been around since, Henry Ford started the motor plant like 100 years ago? It seems overwhelming. So tell me about these ideas and sort of actions to redesigning the system.
Well, I hold that systems are perfectly designed to get what they get. And but if you want different results, it requires structural redesign to produce those results. And organizations need to decide which ones they are actually doing. And so each one requires redesign and not just programming. We know how programming works. I mean, back to your example on the Rooney Rule, it's like sometimes it works and then sometimes it doesn't, right? And if it's just programming or if it's just a good thing to do, then you'll get sometimes it work and then sometimes it doesn't. Nobody benefits from that in the long run.
And so let's talk about these traditional models, systems, what have you. What do, like, say, traditional leadership models? What do they get wrong about Black women? Like, what is happening in that old system that, again, if you don't do anything, nothing changes. What are an example or two about what's getting wrong?
It just assumes that everyone has the same starting point, right? And that everyone has the same, access, that the system already is set up for fairness and injustice. And so starting at that point, um, you miss a whole lot, right? And but if you pay attention, in the beginning, around who belongs, what contributions people can bring, and the levels of respect. And we have high levels of respect. Then you have the opportunity to, think through, work through, and plan, for something different. And I spent 20 years researching it. And so it's not just because I say so, it's science, right? It's actual science behind what moves and what doesn't. And so that's how I am holding, the frameworks. Some of the leadership models, at least as I was coming up through my MBA program, undergrad, and earlier in my career, it didn't take into account relational, cultural, and moral fit. And so most organization frameworks and leadership development programs only develop, one or two. And Black women have built several around credibility, relational capital, moral. And when you take that and transform those leadership qualities and framework, the systems around also change.
And sometimes there's systems around the systems. People will call it networking, the things that happen
Yes.
outside of the 9 to 5. You talk about networking a lot in the book, but you use a phrase called friend raising.
Friend
Tell
raising,
Yeah,
yes.
how is that different from traditional networking?
I think friend raising is very different from traditional networking. Traditional networking, you go in with a certain transaction in mind, right? I need to be connected to this or connected to that. For Black women, we use multiple hub networks, so operating across all dimensions, both professional, communal, spiritual, social spheres, like simultaneously, not just one at a time. And that gives us awareness of, where the barriers are, what change is needed, even before any formal announcement. And so it's really about building the structural intelligence. Um, and that's not what traditional networking models are framed. That's not how they are framed. And it also assumes that everyone has the same level of access, to those networks. And it tends to be more transactional. Friend raising, is long term and is mutual reciprocity, right? And so I can call someone in my network and say, hey, my family is moving because I, have a job change and we're going to Ohio, right? I have other people who are either in Ohio or know other people in Ohio, and we connect, and that's mutually reciprocated just across the networks.
I love how you talk about the idea of networking being transactional, and I think a lot of people don't like to think about it that way.
Oh,
One of
but
the
it
examples
is.
I use is I saw a guy on LinkedIn a couple a couple months back, and
Uh-huh.
he was an executive for like Apple, and when he said and he wrote this, he started writing this piece of like when I worked for Apple, and Apple was my last name. If I sent out a note to someone, I would hear a response back within seconds.
Yeah.
And then Apple, part like many tech companies over the past year, started downsizing. His department was eliminated. And he said, those people that I used to get replies back from instantly
Don't
never reply back.
never reply. Never
And
ever
so
reply.
and it's such a wake up call for people, right? Because you're talking about folks that are already having trouble breaking the system. But then when you're in the system, you realize that networking isn't what you really think it is. It's what use could you do with to another? Like, how helpful can you be to me? And then you'll be part of my network. If you're no longer useful to me, you are not in my network. And that's sort of one of the cold hard facts that people never talk about when it comes to networking. And you're obviously coming at it from a different angle of like trying to break into that network, but it's so hard when it's so transactional.
Yeah, I mean, so true. And the friend raising piece of it is if I'm not in this seat, if I'm not in this organization, if I'm not in the room, do you still support my not being there? Are you still representing my best interest? And am I doing that, for you? Black women have built, communities and communities of leadership, the community, leadership model. And it is so foundational into the way that we are wired and the way that we move. Um, we haven't had the luxury of this experience of, tuning in to WWI FM radio, what's in it for me radio, right? Because it can't just be what's in it for me for two things. One, you can't thrive alone. It's neither sustainable or liberatory. Thriving together produces power and that endures.
That's good. Yeah, I'd love to just get into like a more optimistic vein, if you don't mind, Dr. Brown. And that
Yeah,
is,
yeah, yeah.
uh, and your research spans from 2010 doctoral work to your 2025 analysis. Tell
Yeah.
me about something good. What changed the most on the positive side with Black women leadership across that 15 years, which is it's a pretty big chunk of time. So tell me give me some good vibes. What's happened
Yeah.
over the course of 2010 to 2025 that we could feed off some positivity here?
Hey, what I would say in both studies is Black women are thriving. There's a bunch of research and a bunch of data that will force you to think that we are not. Um, Black women disrupts the conventional career advice, right? And so that's one thing that I'm really excited about there was a lot of things that were counterintuitive to what they say that we must do, right? And so the book covers a lot of ground. The research covers a lot of ground. Caregiving is I've been a caregiver all of my adult life, and we're all in this sandwich generation where we're caring for our children and also caring for our parents. One of the things that showed up in my 2010 study, and it was reconfirmed in 2025, which I absolutely love, that the barrier was never care. The barrier was how systems measured it. And so caregiving in whatever form didn't reduce advancement, it didn't reduce perceived success. It really influenced how women pursued advancement. But the skills of caregiving develops are exactly the skills that organizations pay to develop. And so when I think about anticipation, when I think about coordination, when I think about crisis navigation, when I think about resource allocation with no margin for error, stakeholder management, every one of those are taught in an MBA curriculum. It was taught in my MBA curriculum. I was like, and you're teaching me what I already know, but that's a whole nother conversation. But Black women have been practicing them at home and bringing them to work. And organizations were calling those skills soft. And this just sort of turns that on top of its head. I mean, Black women were thinking that we have to choose between, having a family or having a career. I mean, there's some really good analysis and results that say you don't have to choose. And so what I am really, really excited about is that we have a blueprint. When I was working on my undergrad, coming out of grad school, I was like, how do I get it? Like what is it? And we're having these conversations publicly out loud, documented, in this book. And it works, and other people can just sort of pick it up without walking through or having such a long runway. I mean, it's taken some of us 20, 30 years, and some never even reach it. And so that's what I'm most excited about. That's what the research reveals, and that's what's really positive. This book is not about teaching Black women how to lead. It reaffirms that we already know how and that we've been the blueprint for generations. And that story is what I'm excited about sharing.
I love that, and I love the caregiving angle because I feel like this is strictly anecdotal. I didn't do the research like you do, but working with people that were like didn't have children and then they had children, the sort of the empathetic like dial in that leader just goes up like it cranks up. Because I've known people that like didn't have kids and they were like psychopaths, not
Yes.
obviously.
Yeah, sure, sure. I know exactly people are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then they have a child and they're like, what happened to this person? How did they
Yeah, it's
and
like,
and
who
you're
are
talking about the
you?
fact that Black women, all they've done is caregiving most of their lives. So
Right.
they've already gotta step up on most people that were, the
Yeah.
pre-psychopath to changing because of what either fatherhood or motherhood did to them.
Yeah. Fatherhood, motherhood, community, like Black women care outside of themselves, outside of their houses, because that's just the way that we were built to care for others, and we often need to be reminded to also care for ourselves, and that's a message, in the book as well.
Tell me about that community piece because, a friend of mine, she's a white woman, I think she's in her mid-30s now, and, she was having trouble having kids for a long time. She didn't have her first child till so she's I think she's like 36, 37. Ended up popping it 3 in a row, like, right away.
Yeah.
But I said to her, "This is what you've been struggling." Like, I remember she was trying to get pregnant for, like, a decade, and I was like, "This is what you've been wanting your whole life. So now that you've got it, you've got, like, your typical cookie cutter house with the white the picket fences, you got the husband, you got the 3 kids. Um, is this what you expected?" And she said to me, "No, it's harder than I thought it was gonna be." And I said, "Well, why? Why do you think it is?" And then she goes, "The community. When I was a kid, if I was a kid and I was sick, my mom would just call up a neighbor and say,
Yes.
"Hey, can you go and check on my daughter? Or, can you take my kid to school because I have a work thing?" And she goes, that doesn't exist anymore. And she's a millennial, so it's maybe a generational thing that's happened in the last 20 years. Tell me about that community. Obviously from where we're talking about here, the black women in the community. Is that changed? Is that stayed consistent? Because it was funny to hear that again as a middle-aged white guy to hear like, oh, parenting is hard. I'm like, I figured that, but also the fact that it's harder because you just don't have the community that we had growing up.
That is true. I would say that we don't have the community that we had, growing up. People are moving around more than they have ever done before. Like when I would show up in a city where I would talk to women, there's always this question, sort of, where are you from? And most of the women are from a place where they're not standing or from a place where they're not living, right? And so some of that has been lost in the community when there were no opportunities to get loans at banks, to have employment opportunities. I mean, people in Black communities, they sort of band together, and I'm sure in other communities as well, but I don't live or study in those
Sure.
communities. But, things have changed. I mean, things have evolved, technology, right? We don't necessarily know who our neighbors are. Things are very divisive now on understanding who we can trust, or even if we're trustworthy. That's a whole nother thing. I mean, people knew more of each other. Values were different. There has been a huge shift. And yes, I mean, I'm a mother of four, and my children, I have 2 adult children now, and I have 2 younger, children as well. I have a 21-year gap between
Wow.
those, and I tell you, things are different. Things are very, very different because people are different, the world is different, society is different, so the things that were available, as it relates to, I'm not going to be able, you're gonna go to grandma's house because, I'm not feeling. I went to my grandmother's house. My grandmother was before school care, she was after school care, she was
Same.
drop-in care. If you had the chicken pox, you were at grandma's house, right? And so our parents' lives didn't shift in that way, and that is not the same. It wasn't the same for my adult children when they were small is certainly not the same. And so I'm very intentional around friend raising for our families. And so, as we talk about, like, I don't hold these things like these are the things you do at work. Like, these are the things that you do in community. You have to build, community. But if community was always given to you and you don't have the muscle for building it, you certainly have to pick that up. And so for my younger kids now, we are in friend raising mode because I know how important it is to be with other people through life because you can't do it alone.
That's great. I love that mobility point. I never really thought about that, but it's so true. Like I remember growing up, not to say that we're in the same age bracket, Dr. Brown, but like growing up, people born, raised, lived, and died in the place in the
Yes,
same place.
yes.
And you just don't see it as often anymore. And obviously there are positives to that because that meant that you could go to somewhere else. If you didn't like cold weather in Chicago, you can go
You
to
can go.
Florida
You
and live there.
absolutely can. Yeah. And It's it's certainly a privilege too, right? And people didn't change jobs, like, most people moved around,
Yeah.
because of work, right? And so maybe you will go off to school, go off to college, but you'll come back home and you already have set for what you're gonna work or what you're gonna do. But if you are recruited someplace else, where you went to college, you're in a whole 'nother system. And if you hadn't had the need to build or the privilege
Yeah.
to build outside of where you were towards who you're becoming, it's gonna take some very intentional work around that.
Yeah. Speaking of that, like we've been talking about friend raising, and it's funny. I live in a like a subdivision in Charleston, South Carolina, and
Mhm.
new neighbors came in, and they've been here for like a month. And I was talking to the wife of this couple, and they're like, "No, we love it here, blah blah blah." And she goes, and I don't know if her husband would like that. That she said this to me. He goes, "My husband loves it, but it's really hard for him to make friends. Like he's a guy
Yeah.
in his mid 30s, and they just moved to Charleston." and just have trouble meeting people. So tell me about this friend raising piece. What and I know this a lot of conversations have been had about like how you make friends as an adult. Like intentionality is a huge thing. It's not
Yeah.
like we'll meet you at the schoolyard after, at 3 o'clock and then we're gonna hang out. Adults don't do that. So tell me about how friend raising works for adults. In part of this world of like how hard it is for adults to make friends because of all the work that that it needs to do that.
Yes, it's a whole full-time job to, to make friends, as adults. One of the things that has been, easier for me, in my friend raising is that I had connections to other things and something else, and so we connected, around that. So, for example, I see quite a few of the same people when I do school drop off or when we do, sports events. And so the model of, the way that we used to develop friends, like kids that we went to elementary school with, or kids that we went to, or people that we went to college with, when you get so far removed from that, you have to figure out what is the equivalent of the college? What is the equivalent of the neighborhood. And for me, oftentimes that has been the activities in which my kids were engaged in, and I cared so much about their success in those engagements that I had to be fully present. So I'm not, there on my phone and just sort of, waiting. I'm talking to other moms. I'm talking to, other dads when there are opportunities to get together outside of the, activity. Like if there is a birthday party or if there is, an outing, for parents, I'm all over that. And I know not everyone has, children, but I share that's how it has worked for me and it helped me to get ingrained in the community that I'm forcing my kids to participate in, right? And so, and even with my, my husband, right? And if there are activities, yes, everybody has to show up and do like the annual holiday thing and, other things. But when there's, life events, like if, someone's parent has passed or if there, is a new addition, to the family, how do you connect to someone, human to human without that transaction?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard, and it's so funny, this couple that I was just telling you about, uh, he she's pregnant right now, and I go, "Don't worry, you are set," because now all of a sudden,
Absolutely.
you are
You
gonna
have
be
a
friends like you just said, Dr. Brown, you are also gonna be friends with all the new mothers in the neighborhood, and obviously,
yes,
I wouldn't suggest people have babies just to help with their networking capabilities, but
but it
it's like
does help.
it does it does help, it really does. It's funny too, like, even in my neighborhood, like, all the friends that are friends in these, like, cliques, it's like, "Oh, that's the clique that has the newborns. That's the clique that has the
Yes,
ten-year-old." So it's
yes.
just it is what it is. So how do we translate that into the business world? Because I know there was kind of this pushback a few years back about where people said like, "Oh, I have no time to meet for coffee." Like, there was that whole thing of like, "I'm tired of people asking me for coffee and picking my brain." So there was almost like that pushback of people being like, "I just don't have any time for it." What do you suggest for folks when it comes to breaking the ice, trying to find a network or friend raise within AI's or business vertical or within a company? Any tips or hacks for that?
Yeah, show up human and treat people like they're human, right? I mean, we are in spaces with people all of the time, especially places where we work or institutions that we move in and out of on a regular basis. Talk to people. Be curious about who they are. Not so you can bring it up for public scrutiny at a later time, but be curious about who they are and be willing to share, who you are. Be able to connect on a very you know, basic level. You don't need any programs, to do that. You don't need it's just time. And, if the coffee is not working, yeah, I don't want to have coffee for you to pick my brain. But if you want to have coffee so we can mutually get a chance to know who the heck we're spending most of our time with during waking hours, well, then I'm down for that. And
That's
so
good.
it's just changing the orientation um, around just like curiosity instead of making up your own story about who people are and actually, what they need. And um, you can change that. Like if someone invites you for coffee, you can say, I would love to, have coffee. But here are the boundaries for having coffee. Maybe we're not talking about work. We're not talking about project. We're not gossiping, or maybe we are gossiping. I'm not sure. But it's you just have to be really intentional around it, and you can set the boundaries for how you spend your time with people once you say yes.
That's great. Good, good, good. And I love the idea of intentionality. Let's talk about some action steps here. So, for leaders who want to cultivate Black women leaders, what's the first behavior? This might be tricky, but what's the first behavior they need to stop doing? So they've read your book,
Yes.
Dr. Brown,
Yes.
and they're like, okay, all right, I'm ready. I want to cultivate the next generation of Black women leaders. What should they stop doing to make sure that they're doing the right thing?
Stop designing programs for Black women and start learning from them. So every intervention that I've seen that actually moves the needle starts from the same place: genuine curiosity about what Black women already know, not what they need to be taught, what they have figured out that nobody else has named yet.
It sounds great and inspiring, but, like, how do they do that? Like, how do they like, is it as simple as just starting to talk to someone, like, give and, some of these leaders, as you know, Dr. Brown, are kind of, like, insulated. They're wrapped in bubble wrap. They don't get out and about and speak to people. What are some can you give some advice in terms of, like, how they could break out of their fancy office and be able to do that in a way that not only is just, like, performative, but actually like, makes results?
Yeah, I mean, you just said it. Get out and talk to people, right? Get out and get to know people on a real level, not like a performative level. Like I've sat in meetings and I talk about this in my book where they were like, "Oh, we have a problem with maintaining Black women." No one in that entire meeting, and I'm sure I looked Black because I looked Black when I left my house and showed up to work. I'm sure I looked Black in that meeting, and no one had even asked, what keeps you coming back every day? What do we get right? What do we have wrong? Right? The assumption that they know, that people know what other people need and what other people want. We don't treat anything else like that. We'll go out and, and test the market. We do a market survey, you know, um, to figure out, well, because we don't want to make a mistake. We do not want to make a mistake and invest in millions of dollars into something that we think we already know. We want to be for certain. Those same skills apply.
Mm. That's great. It's almost like the HR when, they have the exit interview with folks when they leave the company. It's like, why wait so long to ask those questions? Like a question like
Why?
you said, like you were sitting there. Why not just ask then?
Why not? You're clearly not talking to the people that are gone. I don't know. If you're getting the information at exit interview time, well, you are light years behind.
Well, speaking of light years, your daughters are not light years behind. They're coming. And you dedicate your book to my daughters, Olivia Dante and Sage Lillian. Here's to you claiming your
Yes.
power and realizing your promise. Why was it so important to dedicate your book to your two girls?
Oh, I love them so much. I just really want it to be easier for them in navigating the world. I am not and was not raising girls. I was raising Black women. And so if I start from that premise, what do they need in order to reach their full potential on their own terms? And so This is for them. Olivia is 33 right now. She's my oldest, and Sage is 9. So a lot of space, in between them, but the playbook is still the same.
Excellent. And the playbook is Revolutionary Leadership, a powerful playbook for Black women. She is Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown. Dr. Brown, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having this conversation, and I look forward to people reading the book and talking about it.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Dr. Brown and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.